Do you really believe the Omen was just a horror movie? What if the character of Damien Thorn wasn't born from a screenwriter's imagination, but from a carefully constructed lie meant to bury something far darker? Tonight I'm telling you the story they've spent decades trying to erase. It begins in Rome, June 6, 1946, a date that later became iconic in horror fiction, but first marked the birth of a real child whose existence triggered a chain of disturbing events across continents and generations. His name wasn't Damien, not at first. According to documents sealed by the Vatican until 2067, the child was born Robert Thorne, no relation to the fictional ambassador from the film. The timing was no accident. Post-World War II chaos provided the perfect cover. The birth took place at a small private hospital on the outskirts of Rome, an AER facility that burned to the ground just 3 weeks later, destroying every medical record inside. All 7 staff members present at the delivery died within 18 months. Officially, the deaths were unrelated: a hit and run, a fall, a drowning, a gas leak. Investigators found no connections, just coincidences. Robert was adopted by an American diplomat stationed in Italy. This part mirrors the film, but the details don't. Declassified files briefly released in 1998, then quickly resealed, reveal the adoption was arranged by Cardinal Stephen Valente. He was later found dead in his chambers, his throat cut with what forensic experts described as an unusually precise incision made by an unidentified instrument. The case remains unsolved. The Thorne family returned to Washington, D.C. in 1947. For 5 years, nothing unusual was recorded, at least not publicly. Privately, it was a different story. Recently digitized journal entries from the family's housekeeper, Maria Cletti, describe animals found mutilated on the property. The child speaking in his sleep in languages he had never been taught. Sudden, dramatic drops in temperature whenever he entered a room. Maria disappeared in 1952. Her journal resurfaced in 2007, hidden inside the wall of her sister's home during renovations. For decades, her sister insisted Maria had returned to Italy. There are no immigration records to support that. Maria never contacted her family again. The first confirmed death directly linked to Robert occurred on his 5th birthday. A photographer hired for the party was found hanging from an oak tree in the Thorne family garden. Authorities ruled it a suicide, despite the fact that the man had just received a major promotion and purchased engagement rings the day before. Every photograph taken at the party vanished. None were ever recovered. By age 7, Robert was enrolled at St. Matthew's Academy, an elite private school in Virginia. Within his first semester, 3 teachers requested transfers. One of them, Dr. James Leal, left education entirely and admitted himself to a psychiatric facility in Maryland. His intake records, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request in 2012, contain repeated references to the boy's eyes and something he called the darkness behind them. Dr. Leal died 3 months later. Self-inflicted wounds, 37 of them. A pattern was forming. No one officially acknowledged it. The Thorne family's wealth and diplomatic status kept investigations shallow. Problems disappeared. People disappeared. In 1955, a fire broke out in the chapel at St. Matthew's during a Christmas service. Robert, then 9 years old, was notably absent, despite being marked present on the attendance sheet. 5 children died. The cause was listed as faulty wiring. Maintenance records for the previous 3 years were never found. In 1956, the Thornes relocated to London, officially for diplomatic reasons. Internal State Department memos, heavily redacted but partially visible through FOIA requests, suggests the move was recommended after concerning incidents that required distance from prior environments. No details were provided. In London, Robert attended Harrow School. His academic records show exceptional intelligence paired with what one teacher described as a deeply unsettling emotional detachment. 3 students who shared his dormitory were treated for night terrors. One never recovered and remained institutionalized until his suicide in 1972. A Harrow groundskeeper named William Jennings kept a private log from 1957 to 1959. His entries describe animals found ritualistically arranged on school grounds, always in places Robert had been seen the day before. Jennings was dismissed for alcoholism in 1959. His body was discovered in the Thames 3 weeks later. Alcohol in his system. Case closed. The Thorns returned to Washington in 1960. Robert, now 14, had become charismatic, persuasive, and unnaturally commanding. School records describe him as a natural leader. His inner circle consisted entirely of children from powerful families, senators' sons, industrial heirs, media moguls' children. They called themselves the Assembly. That detail surfaced decades later in the private correspondence of Michael Harrington, son of Senator William Harrington. Michael died in a boating accident in 1962. His personal effects, especially letters describing the Assembly's activities, were logged, processed, and scheduled for return to his family. They never arrived. When questioned in 1997, the officer responsible had no memory of the items, despite his signature appearing on the chain of custody documents. The Assembly remained hidden, but its influence was growing. By 1965, the members of the Assembly were no longer just privileged students. They were strategically placed inside the world's most powerful institutions: Harvard, Yale, Oxford. Communications later uncovered in a storage unit rented under a false name reveal something chilling: a coordinated plan to infiltrate very specific departments: political science, religious studies, archaeology, media, and communications. Robert Thorne attended Harvard, focusing on ancient civilizations and religious mythology. His thesis advisor, Dr. Eleanor Chambers, grew deeply unsettled by his academic obsession. Her notes describe an intense fixation on apocalyptic prophecy, ancient fertility cults, and hidden interpretations of Revelation 13. Privately, she began documenting her concerns and sent copies to a colleague at Princeton University. Both died within a month of each other in 1968. Different states, different causes, same outcome. Robert's thesis was never filed in Harvard's archives. A full search in 2001 found no record of its submission despite Chambers's notes, clearly stating it was completed. What happened to it is unknown. What it contained can only be guessed from fragments of her writings, disturbing parallels between ancient Sumerian rituals and modern power structures, and troubling personal theories centered on bloodlines. After graduating, Robert vanished from public records for 3 years. No job history, no travel records, no financial activity. He was a ghost. Yet witnesses would later place him in Rome, Jerusalem, and Baghdad, cities of deep religious and archaeological importance. He was never alone. Members of the Assembly were always with him, and somehow they gained access to sites closed to the public, restricted even to scholars. Robert resurfaced in 1974, accepting a position at a prestigious think tank with close ties to the U.S. State Department. His specialty: religious conflict and power dynamics in developing nations. Within 2 years, he contributed to policy recommendations for 6 countries. Each one experienced massive civil unrest within months. Thousands died, governments collapsed, power structures shifted, and during the chaos, ancient relics vanished from museums and private collections. Officials called it coincidence, statistical noise, The pattern continued. Robert moved quietly between advisory roles, private consultations, and policy groups. Never famous, never visible, always near power. At the same time, assembly members embedded themselves across media, finance, education, and government. A web formed, subtle, invisible unless you knew where to look. Their communications shifted into coded references hidden inside academic papers and ordinary business transactions, all tied to specific dates and locations of religious significance. Then, in 1975, something unexpected happened. A screenwriter named David Seltzer wrote a horror film about a demonic child named Damien Thorn. The similarities were impossible to ignore. A child adopted in Rome, mysterious deaths, a powerful father, details that had never been public appearing suddenly on screen as fiction. The production of The Omen was plagued by disasters, lightning strikes, equipment failures, and the death of an animal handler under circumstances eerily similar to events in the script. The press called it clever marketing. Industry insiders knew better. After the film's release, Robert Thorne legally changed his name. The records were sealed by court order. His new identity has never been confirmed, though forensic handwriting analysis suggests he may have lived under at least 3 separate identities between 1976 and 1990. Seltzer himself became withdrawn after the film's success. In rare interviews, he avoided questions about inspiration, blaming research and imagination. But in 1981, he told a Los Angeles Times reporter something strange. "Sometimes I feel like the story found me." The reporter's notes, recovered after her death in 1999, include an unpublished detail. She wrote that Seltzer appeared genuinely frightened when discussing the film's origins, refused to answer whether he'd met anyone who inspired the character, and repeatedly glanced over her shoulder during the interview. Throughout the 1980s, the Assembly continued its work. Their foundations funded archaeological expeditions to sites mentioned in ancient apocalyptic texts. Artifacts recovered from these digs rarely appeared in museum catalogs. Documentation vanished from university archives. In 1989, a Columbia University researcher named Dr. Sarah Keller began connecting the dots. Her work focused on missing religious artifacts, but her notes reveal a growing fear, a deliberate effort to collect and suppress objects tied to end times prophecy across multiple faiths. Dr. Keller died in a house fire in 1990. Faulty wiring, officials said. Her research was destroyed. Backup copies stored with colleagues were reported lost or stolen. One colleague, Dr. Marcus Reed, continued her work in secret. His body was found in his office in 1991. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. No note. Case closed. By the 1990s, the Assembly had expanded into digital media and emerging technology. Early internet forums, moderated by individuals later linked to the group, hosted obscure religious discussions centered on prophecy and bloodlines. Information disappeared without explanation. Users who asked too many questions found their accounts compromised. Some had their personal information leaked. The web was no longer just physical. It was everywhere. In 1996, an anonymous package arrived at the office of investigative journalist Peter Kaufman. Inside were photocopies of partial documents linking Robert Thorne to multiple unexplained deaths, along with evidence suggesting Thorne was still active, now operating under a new identity. Kaufman began digging deeper. He logged every discovery in an encrypted file, updating it daily. 3 months into the investigation, someone broke into his apartment. Nothing valuable was taken. No cash, no electronics, only his computer and his research notes. The case was never solved. 2 weeks later, Kaufman vanished while following a lead in Chicago. His encrypted backup was programmed to send automatically to a trusted colleague after a set period of inactivity. When it finally arrived, the file was corrupted beyond recovery. Only fragments remained. Among them were repeated references to the child grown to man and preparations for the appointed time. It could have ended there. Another missing investigator, another dead trail. But in 2001, a forgotten server backup from one of the early internet forums, moderated by members of the Assembly, was discovered by a graduate student studying the rise of online religious communities. The backup contained private messages between moderators discussing RT and his current activities. They confirmed he was still active, still protected, still moving under a new name. The messages also mentioned something else, an approaching convergence, and preparations underway for 2026. The student, Miguel Santana, published his findings in a small academic journal. Within days, the article was retracted due to methodological concerns. His academic advisors suddenly withdrew their support. His funding was cut. His university access was revoked. Santana returned to his family in Mexico, abandoning his studies completely. In 2005, a new leak surfaced. This time, a series of private emails from a prominent think tank. The messages discussed historical sites that required special attention before the anniversary. The exact date was never specified, but archaeologists noticed something disturbing. Every site mentioned was linked to ancient fertility cults and apocalyptic prophecies, the same subjects at the center of Robert Thorne's missing Harvard thesis. The people involved in these emails held influential roles across government cultural agencies, private security firms, and religious organizations. When journalists tried to investigate, they hit walls. Classified files, suddenly closed excavation sites, and sources who refused to talk. One journalist, Elena Morales, refused to stop, despite repeated warnings. In 2007, her investigative notes were found in her apartment. She was not. Her case remains open. Between 2010 and 2015, a new pattern emerged online. Social media accounts discussing connections between ancient cults and modern power structures were systematically targeted. First harassed, then hacked, then publicly doxxed. Security experts traced the attacks to highly sophisticated networks designed to hide their origins. No group ever claimed responsibility. In 2017, retired Vatican archivist Father Paolo Rinaldi gave an interview to an Italian documentary filmmaker. He spoke briefly about restricted documents he had handled, files related to a birth in Rome in 1946, sealed by direct papal order. The interview was never aired. The filmmaker's equipment was stolen the next day. 1 week later, Father Rinaldi suffered a massive stroke. He never regained the ability to communicate. The documentary was abandoned. So what happened to Robert Thorne? And where is he now? The evidence suggests he never disappeared at all. His identity appears buried beneath layers of legal protections and falsified records. Members of the Assembly still hold powerful positions across global institutions. Their agenda, pieced together from leaked messages and damaged archives, points toward a single event. December 2026, the 80-year anniversary of that birth in Rome. References to the convergence and the appointed time appear again and again in what little private correspondence has survived. Astronomical data shows a rare planetary alignment set to occur on December 21st, 2026, the winter solstice. The same date described in multiple ancient texts, predicting apocalyptic events and the rise of a figure with unnatural lineage. Is it a coincidence that Hollywood has announced a new reboot of the Omen, scheduled for release in June 2026? Is it a coincidence that archaeological expeditions, funded by foundations linked to Assembly members, are now focused on 7 sites named in ancient Sumerian end times prophecies? Is it a coincidence that private security firms connected to the same network have quietly acquired land surrounding those locations? There are no coincidences here, only patterns, waiting to be noticed. In 2020, data analyst Christopher Way began compiling those patterns. He built an algorithm designed to connect seemingly unrelated people, events, and resources. What it revealed was unmistakable: a coordinated global network matching everything we now associate with the assembly. Communication flows, financial movements, strategic preparations, all aimed at December 2026. Way published his preliminary findings on an academic server in February 2021. The paper was downloaded 347 times before the server suffered a catastrophic failure. All data was lost. Backup systems failed at the same moment. That same night, Way's personal devices were compromised. His research vanished. The following week, he requested a leave of absence from his university. Colleagues said he seemed anxious, paranoid even. In his final email, sent to his sister just before disappearing, he wrote, "If anything happens to me, remember this. Patterns don't lie. They're preparing for something. December 21st, 2026. I've seen too much. Don't look for me." 3 days later, his sister reported him missing. The investigation is still open. Christopher Way has never been found. So the question remains, what exactly is being prepared for 2026? All the remaining fragments point to the same conclusion: a ritual of some kind, a convergence that requires specific artifacts, specific locations, and specific bloodlines. The exact same elements described in Robert Thorne's missing Harvard thesis more than 50 years ago. The same elements that have quietly driven the Assembly's actions for decades. In 2023, a former security contractor came forward anonymously. He claimed to have worked for a foundation connected to the Assembly, providing protection for archaeological excavations in Iraq, Turkey, and Egypt. According to his testimony, artifacts were recovered but never officially recorded. Sealed containers were transported under diplomatic protection. Facilities were being prepared near each site. They're building something, so so sad. Something that connects these locations. Something that only works under very specific astronomical conditions. Shortly after his testimony was recorded, the contractor disappeared. His identity is still being protected by journalists who believe revealing it would put lives at risk. Perhaps the most disturbing part of this story isn't what's happening, but how effectively it's been hidden. Local incidents never connect at the national level. Investigations stall. Evidence vanishes. Witnesses recant or disappear. Journalists quietly abandon stories. Researchers suddenly change focus. Over time, the pattern itself becomes the strongest evidence, a systematic suppression of information spanning generations. Now, as the 80-year anniversary of the birth in Rome draws closer, activity is accelerating. More archaeological sites are being closed for restoration. More artifacts are disappearing from public collections. More researchers are reporting harassment and threats. More media attention is being pulled toward manufactured controversies, away from these patterns. You're watching this because something in you recognizes the truth when you hear it. Something sees the pattern forming. But be careful. They're watching too. The Assembly has become highly skilled at identifying people who notice, those who connect the dots. Their reach extends into social media algorithms, search engine rankings, and communication platforms. The moment you start looking for confirmation of what I've shared, you become visible to them. So why tell you any of this? Because the truth needs witnesses. Because patterns only have power when they're recognized. Because December 21st, 2026 is approaching, and whatever has been set in motion must be understood before it happens. The fictional Damien Thorn was created to hide the real Robert Thorne. to turn truth into entertainment, to make the pattern feel familiar, harmless, fictional, and it worked. For decades, it worked. But fiction can't contain the truth forever. Reality always leaks through the cracks. As you watch this, think about what I haven't told you, what I can't tell you without putting you at greater risk. Think about the patterns in your own life, the unexplained events, the disconnected news stories that somehow felt related, the sense that something has been quietly building beneath everyday reality. You felt it. That's why you're still watching. The true story behind Damien Thorn isn't just history. It's ongoing, it's evolving, and it's moving toward a climax. December 21st, 2026 is not just another winter solstice, not just another planetary alignment. It's the moment the assembly has prepared for across generations. The moment Robert Thorne, whatever name he uses now, has been moving toward his entire life. What happens then? The surviving evidence suggests a ritual meant to fulfill prophecies found across multiple ancient traditions. Prophecies describing a child born of both human and inhuman bloodlines, destined not to end the world, but to reshape it. A rebirth of reality under new authority, under his authority. Do I believe this? After years of tracking these patterns, after seeing what happens to those who dig too deeply, after watching evidence erased and witnesses silenced, yes, I believe something is coming. Something powerful people have spent generations preparing. Something centered on a man whose life has been hidden behind layers of fiction and misdirection. You don't have to believe. Not yet. Just watch. Pay attention to what happens next. Notice the archaeological announcements in the coming months, the sudden deaths or disappearances of researchers in certain fields, the subtle shift in how apocalyptic prophecy is discussed in mainstream media, the growing number of closed sites worldwide, the way separate threads begin to converge, always pointing toward December 2026. By watching this, you've already become part of the pattern. The algorithm that brought this video to you has logged your interest. Your digital footprint now includes this information. They'll know. They always do. But there's safety in numbers, in awareness spreading faster than it can be contained. If enough people recognize the pattern, it changes. Reality shifts. Prophecy weakens. The future isn't fixed, no matter how carefully it's been planned. Remember, December 21st, 2026. The convergence, the fulfillment of what began in Rome 80 years earlier, the culmination of the Assembly's work across generations. Watch closely. Trust the patterns, not the explanations given for them. Question coincidences. And if you truly understand what I've shared, leave a comment below with just these words. I see the pattern. Nothing more. Nothing that draws attention. Just acknowledgement. The true story behind Damien Thorn isn't over. It's still being written. And now, whether you wanted it or not, you're part of it. We're all watching, waiting, witnessing. December 21st, 2026. Mark the date. And remember, they're watching too.